Hey everyone, welcome to GTM Secrets with Stephen Lowisz. And today I have Keith Rabkin on the line. Very interesting background. We talk about everything sales, marketing, go-to-market, RevOps, you name it. Keith, I don't want to butcher your background. It's very, very intriguing, but why don't you give us a quick synopsis, man?
Thanks, Stephen. So I'm the CRO of PandaDoc. PandaDoc is the single solution for all your agreement needs. And I would say I have a pretty non-traditional CRO background. After graduating business school, I went to work at Google for 10 years, mostly in strategy and operations. Learned so much at Google. It was a really interesting time to be there, right in the heyday of when it was innovating and going in directions beyond search. Worked there in strategy and then went to YouTube and did operations and finished up at Google Fiber, always looking for ways that I could serve the customer. And that time at Google was really formative in my values and thinking about how I work in a technology sector. Google's done such a great job historically of focusing on the user, and that's been really impactful to me as a revenue leader. And then I went to Johnson & Johnson, did strategy work there to try to change the face of healthcare and make it a health technology company. Lots of learnings of how hard that is to fundamentally change a 100-year-old company to a technology company. Then went to Adobe and ran go-to-market strategy and the mobile team, which was my entry into SaaS, and really came to love that. In SaaS, you've got to constantly earn your customers' trust to get that renewal. And I think that really fits very nicely into the foundational background I had at Google, and then came to PandaDoc as the CRO, where I run all of revenue, sales, marketing, CX partnerships, and RevOps.
What does the mobile team at Adobe do?
Yeah, so you may not know, but there is Photoshop on the iPad. There is a mobile painting app. There is actually Adobe Acrobat for your phone. Lots of really cool apps, but they're competing against very nimble upstarts like Canva, who's made a mobile-first solution, PixArt, who's got a really great editor. So it's kind of a nascent competitive space, with the next generation growing up on their phones and not spending as much time on PCs.
Now I have to ask, since you were at Google, iPhone or Android?
Oh, I'm iPhone all the way. I just, again, go back to focus on the user and the customer. And I think iPhone has done a phenomenal job of understanding user needs and building a solution that really works for them. And Android's certainly very powerful. I think their user is a very sophisticated user who wants to customize, but iPhone, how about yourself?
I am iPhone. I begrudgingly switched, and I do like it, mostly because of iMessage. But I do make the joke, if you want to see what's coming out in this year's iPhone, look at what Android did 2 years ago. Take that as you will.
Yep, there's some truth to that.
For what it's worth, we're PandaDoc customers at Identity Matrix. So hopefully I get some brownie points there, man.
You absolutely do, and we appreciate your business.
So you've worked at some of the coolest tech companies and Fortune 100, right? J&J, I don't know where Adobe's on there, but high up, obviously Google. What do you attribute to your career growth? You're not, I don't know your age, but you're not a 65-year-old guy that's been there and done that. You obviously grew through the ranks very quickly. What do you attribute that to?
Well, I do have my fair share of gray hair, so
I find some in my beard as well.
Yeah, maybe not 60, but I think, there was one thing I learned in business school that I really took away, and it's not what you would think, but it has applied to my career, and I think it's helped me. So that is the value of options. And you don't normally think about it in your career. Like you think about buying or selling options on the stock market, and those options have a quantitative value, right? Which you can trade. But that value applies to almost anything in life, which is when you have choices, those choices create value. You can open doors for yourself that you may or may not have. And throughout my career, I've always tried to create new options. And so I think that's really important as you're pursuing a career, thinking about, are you opening doors or you're closing doors for yourself? Because you don't know what's going to be in the future, especially now. The times are changing so quickly with AI, and technology has always been changing quickly. So how do you keep as many doors open as you can? Of course, you want to chart your path deliberately, but that doesn't mean you can't keep choices open. So that's a really foundational principle that I have. The other two, one comes from my time at Google, which is a focus on the customer. I think if you focus on the customer, you're going to do the right thing for your business. And I'm a really big believer in trying to find ways that customer focus can pay dividends back to your business. And then I would say, lastly, it's about grit and tenacity. One of the people who worked for me at Google always tells others that I made my career on doing the problems nobody else wanted to solve. And I really believe that the best things in life are going to be hard to do. So you just got to take them on, tackle them, and get through them.
How did you guys at Google focus on the customer more than others? I mean, Google, I'd say half of what they put out is awesome. Half of it, what was their social network? I don't remember.
There's several of them.
Yeah. But do you guys have better product analytics than anybody? Is that where it comes from? Is it customer interviews and focus groups? What is that at a practical level?
So some of it starts with just the core principles, right? The founders, Larry and Sergey, were absolutely brilliant at setting down principles that they believe customers care about, right? Speed of app, simplicity, getting you to the answer as quickly as possible. I agree with you. Not everything has always succeeded. And I think it's the things where they didn't look at the customer that have been particularly problematic. But when you understand what the customer wants, and I do think it starts with analytics, looking at that data, consistently trying to ask that question behind the question of what does this data tell me about what the customer is doing? That's really powerful. They also would do tons of user interviews. And so those user interviews brought back more qualitative information. And lastly, something that was really powerful was testing the product with the internal team. We called it dog food there. I think the more popular term now is drinking champagne. I still like the dog food. But, looking at what your employees say about the product as they're using it can be really powerful to get that first wave of user feedback.
You're more PC than me. Usually I say drink my own Kool-Aid, but that doesn't go over well with some. I want to go back to something we were talking about right before we hopped on, which is you come from an operations background. Now, I will say it, you don't have to, but coming from an ops background, and I'm a sales guy before I ever became a marketer, you probably know BS compared to some of the sales leaders out there. But how does having an ops background, how does that distinguish you from the typical sales and marketing folks that became a CRO?
So when you think about solving sales problems, marketing problems, anything in go-to-market, it's still an operation. What differentiates it or distinguishes it is that it's an operation that is customer focused and involves the exchange of revenue. So when I think about how do I optimize the go-to-market at PandaDoc or at Adobe before, I treat it as a system. And it's a more complex system than a back-end system, right? Whether it's doing customer support for Gmail or optimizing an ad network. It's more complex because it's got people involved, and people have really different dynamics, and not every person is the same. But fundamentally, you can break that system down into parts. And I try to look at what's happening from a revenue perspective or a demand gen perspective, and then try to understand what is the bottleneck and where is it not functioning. And I think when you start to take these really big problems, like my pipeline is stagnant, and you try to understand what is it about the pipeline that's stagnant? Is it your demand gen's not working? Is it your sales reps aren't qualifying? Is it the dollar amount that's slowing or not growing? You suddenly have a different set of levers that you can pull instead of looking at this big monolithic problem. And so I try to break down most revenue problems that way.
Got it. Now, talking a little bit more about PandaDoc, I know we've been talking about Google a good chunk. You guys have to go up against a behemoth, right, called DocuSign. And there's a bunch of smaller companies trying to eat your lunch as well, right? I obviously picked PandaDoc, as I mentioned. You guys obviously are good at marketing. You're not a small company. I call you early enterprise. Is that fair?
I'd call us mid-market personally.
So, fair enough. How do you guys do particularly demand gen different than some of the others out there where you have captured so much market share? You are trying to eat DocuSign for lunch. What do you guys do differently there than some of the others?
Well, first, I start with a great product. So I
Okay.
think we have the best product on the market. And one of the things we're trying to do is bring it to market and tell the PandaDoc story of why it is actually better. And that starts with being a complete solution. This complete solution to get your agreements signed, completed, and done is perfect. And I try to let that story speak for itself in demand gen and in our website, where I think we have this really rich canvas to tell that story. So you start with the product, right? And if people use our product and they use DocuSign, I'm pretty sure you're going to see the difference. I'm pretty sure you're going to end up with PandaDoc. It's more, they came first. They are the incumbent. They are synonymous with the category. So people go to them by default. But our job is to compete creatively to get people to consider us. And I think when we're considered, we have that door open. So first, amazing product. Second, just an awesome demand gen team. I love my demand gen team. The head of demand gen is probably super annoyed with me because I'm constantly asking her questions, but she's done a phenomenal job of upping our game. And it starts with just telling the story, right? Being in the places your customers are. The more you understand your customers, the more you understand how they look for your solution, why they look for your solution, and what else they're considering. And I think between product marketing here, which has done a really great job of understanding those three things, and then helping demand gen refine the message to those audiences in the places they lurk and live, is how we get them in. So I would say that's kind of the secret to what we're doing, and we still have room to do it better. And, we recently launched a CPQ tool to help get quotes signed, which are an integral part of agreements. And that space is challenging. I mean, you're in go-to-market, that the incumbents in the CPQ space, which is not DocuSign, are actually really hard to implement. And sales teams do not like using their tools. So we've built, again, product first, an amazing CPQ product that is fundamentally better for both sets of buyers. The salespeople have to use it and the RevOps team that has to implement it. So we got to tell that story. We haven't quite got the news out, but we know where RevOps people live. We know where sales people live on the internet. So now we put the message out and we make sure that value prop is clear, and we'll look to drive some good business off it.
What is your demand gen team look like? Is it split between like organic and paid, etc.? I mean, what's kind of the makeup?
So we have a central demand gen leader. Maybe demand gen's not a fair name. Call it digital marketing. She owns both organic and paid. And that paid we break down between search and display, or paid social. So we're trying to look at the vectors that the customers come in on, but fundamentally you've got to understand where they are, how to reach them. And some of that is the overlap with product marketing, who is constantly talking to the demand gen team and giving them the information to make sure that they can optimize those campaigns in the best way.
What are your favorite channels for top of funnel and bottom of funnel?
So top of funnel, we continue to do really well with organic. We've built a very good SEO strategy, and that team is phenomenal. I think PandaDoc's been written up. We aspire to be as widely known for our SEO as Canva is. So that's a challenge I constantly tell the team. I'm like, they're best in class. Let's do what they do. I would say beyond that, search, we still do a ton in search. And that is both Google and increasingly Bing. One of the things I'm looking at is how do we make sure we're showing up in AI results in the right way, right? That's sort of the bleeding edge. Nobody knows what's behind their ranking algorithm. I was talking to someone who's an LLM expert, and I was like, how do I get to be the top ranked in the Gemini results? And he's like, nobody knows, Keith.
And it's getting harder now that Chat GPT just launched their search function. I think it was last week.
Right. But I think that's an opportunity. So again, as someone who's competing against an incumbent, how do I get there? So that's another challenge I'm putting forth to the team. And then, we do quite a bit on LinkedIn as well. And it's very easy to find RevOps and salespeople on LinkedIn. So we do that. Increasingly looking into RevOps communities. I think that's a really important one for us, but we haven't done as good a job there. So still some room to improve.
Got it. Makes sense. So look, you obviously know your stuff. Otherwise, these awesome companies wouldn't be hiring you. What do you think most CROs get wrong about their go-to-market strategy?
This is a hard one. I mean, I would say there's two things that come to mind. First is making sure that you have perfect alignment between marketing and sales. And that's one of the things I love about my job, right? I have sales and marketing rolling up to me, so I can make sure that they're focused on the same thing. I've been in previous companies where marketing is optimizing for something that sales is not optimizing
Yep.
for. And you get into these battles between the CRO and the CMO, and, they're blaming each other, and it's not helpful. The best thing is to align on what you're trying to do, regardless of whether they roll up to the same person or not, and then optimize for that. Focus, 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 which is the second part. You've got to be focused. And my team will probably laugh when they hear that because I'm the kind of CRO that wants to do everything. But ultimately, being focused produces great results. So I think that is the second thing that CROs get wrong, is we're trying to do too much. And yeah, sometimes you've got a large team, right? So I have a pretty decent sized team. I think we're like 250 people across all of revenue. We can do a lot, but it means they need to be focused on sort of core principles and core things we're trying to get done rather than ourselves too thin.
I'm a big perpetrator of squirrel syndrome. I hear you on that. And I think it's a decades old argument of marketing says they're bringing in leads, sales says they're garbage leads. That's why they're not converting, etc. So, I mean, that's why CROs are becoming more and more commonplace for sure, or at least CROs that own both sales and marketing. So I hear you on that. Now, you are in a mid-market company. What can the mid-market companies and even down to SMBs learn from Google, from Adobe, from those industry giants? What are they doing different and better than maybe the mid-market guy outside of just spending more cash?
So I think I'm going to sound like a little bit of like I'm beating a dead horse here, but first, customer focus. Know who your customer is, understand them, build a solution that works for them. I think a lot of times you're trying to drive to short-term revenue in a way that doesn't help your customer. And there's examples all over the place, right? I think even we've talked about Google a lot on this podcast, but if you look at some of the things they're doing now, and you even said it, you're like, half the stuff they do doesn't work. Those are the things where they're not focused on their customer. And, if you go on YouTube now, and I'm sure you do, it's like ad after ad after ad after ad. Sign me up for YouTube Plus. Like, I don't want to do that. I will watch the ad when it's relevant to me, when it's interesting. And that was a really core philosophy that YouTube had for a while. Make a great product that the customer wants. If you do that, you are going to have success, right? And then it's on you. It's on you to market it and sell it effectively. But your job is a lot easier because you've got this thing customers want. So I think that's a really key focus. The second is related, but understand your ICP, right? Sometimes you just want to be everything to everybody. It's really appealing because then your total addressable market is much bigger. But you're going to struggle to have your message, and you're going to struggle to get it across, and you're going to, dilute your marketing, and your salespeople are going to have a hard time knowing what to say to close. So be very focused on that ICP.
But by the way,
yeah,
go
ahead.
I'm going to switch topics a little bit.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think the last one is you've got to have urgency. You've got to move fast, right? I think that was one of the things Google did really well in the old days was if something was broken, we moved incredibly fast to fix it. We didn't sit around, with the saying, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Did I get that right? Or the opposite?
Yeah, you did.
So, it's early here on the West Coast, but you have to ship and you have to get things in the hands of customers, and they will be forgiving if you fix it quickly. So I think that is sort of my third thing that
I have heard Google's very agile, which is interesting because it's a behemoth.
Yeah. So when I was there, I joined in 2007 and it was 14,000 people. At 14,000, it was very agile. I mean, we moved very fast, we pivoted quickly, decision making was distributed, and it worked really well. There was a lot of trust in the leadership. And so, you could push decisions down very easily. I don't know if it's the same anymore. They're significantly bigger, right? 10 times bigger for sure, maybe more. I don't know if it's the same anymore, but it certainly was agile back when I was there. But the funny thing is, it's really funny because when I went to J&J, you would hear the word like, we've got to be agile, we've got to be agile, we've got to be agile. When I was at Google, no one ever said we have to be agile. Like you just moved fast. Again, like it goes back to principles. We never said we're going to be agile. And I think that's a really interesting dynamic that when I was at J&J, my team was really small. It was made up of a lot of ex-Googlers. We're like, why is everybody talking about agile here? Like, just go do it. So I think that's interesting.
I've sold into J&J. They were a client. I've never been internal, but I will tell you from a vendor perspective, it does not feel agile. Just throwing that out there. No idea what internal culture is like. So here's my next question. Everyone right now on LinkedIn is saying this is dead, that's dead, whether it's email, SEO, whatever. Where do you see GTM going in the next year, 2 years, 3 years? And let me preface that by actually, let me ask you a question first. Is PandaDoc, I know you're inbound, but do you guys also do outbound?
We do. I think that's something my VP of sales, who is amazing, has championed over the last 6 months. And we've seen a dramatic improvement in the amount of pipeline we can generate by going outbound. So something
outbound dying.
No, I definitely don't see outbound dying. I think there is a place, but again, it starts with understanding your ICP and how do you reach them. And I think the piece around outbound that's super important is understanding intent, right? There's this whole ecosystem of companies that are doing intent, but I think they've either obfuscated, right? I think some have obfuscated how to get intent or what that intent means, and others make it like pretty watered down intent. But where you understand intent, again, it goes back to like understanding your ICP, you can be very successful with outbound. So even in 6 months, we've seen a dramatic increase in our pipeline from outbound, and that outbound deal size is significantly larger than our inbound.
My take is outbound's never going to die. AI can't replace human connection. And I got to say, cold calls still work. I mean, you have to call the right person at the right time. Don't get me wrong, but I don't care how many thousands of emails you send in a day. Cold calls still take the cake for best conversion rates, at least in my experience. So I fully agree with you.
Yeah. And I think, the other piece is enablement. Like I didn't talk at all about enablement so far, but having your sellers understand how to do outbound is absolutely crucial. Like if you just pray and spray, even if you have a targeted ICP, but you've got a seller who doesn't know how to break the ice or get in there, right?
Yep.
Like you said, right person, right time, right message is the third part. So you've got to make sure that your seller knows how to do that effectively.
So this is where I have a lot of fun because before I ran Identity Matrix, I was a RevOps agency. So I can nerd out on MarTech and sales tech all damn day. What are some of your favorite tools that you guys use in your stack? And I'll start it by asking, what CRM do you all use?
Yeah, so we use Salesforce. I don't know. It feels like a lot of people do, but I would say they're not making it easy for us. I don't think Salesforce is making it easy to innovate or do the things we want to do. So I'll say that. I'll give you my two favorite tools. One is HubSpot, which we use for marketing automation.
Yep.
And it's an elegant tool. It's very easy to use, pretty simple to set up. And I think where HubSpot is going with their AI and their agents, I think it's a system called Breeze, is genius.
Well, Breeze is basically Clearbit. They bought Clearbit.
But they're also putting agents in and allowing automation of tasks using that AI in a way that many other companies aren't doing. It's really powerful. If I was a small company now, I would be on HubSpot CRM as well. I just think the way they're going is incredible, super strong. So fantastic part of our tech stack, and we, like I said, we do a lot with email nurture. So HubSpot for marketing automation is fantastic. The second is Gong, and love what they've done from just democratizing CI. I know a lot of people think it's, any tool can be replaced and they all kind of do the same thing. I think there's some truth to that, but what I love about Gong is the user interface. It's just phenomenally easy. It's quick to get to value. They're not putting in place really complex paywalls or making it difficult, right? Like I want to share a clip of a great sales rep that just crushed, a $600,000 deal. My CEO does not have a license for Gong, but I can share that clip with him, right? And so they've made it really easy to extend the platform in a way that provides unique value to the customer. And we've been using them for forecasting for about 3 months now, and that's going pretty well. So I think they've done a really nice job of centralizing and making things easy.
I've always preferred Gong over Chorus, I will say. There's a lot of them out there, but I hear you on the UI. It is a very good, simple UI. What you referenced intent. What intent tools, if any, do you guys use?
We've been trying quite a few. I don't think we've cracked it, which again gives me even more hope for outbound. So we started on outbound. We use a little bit of intent from Zoom Info. We look at people who came to our website. You mining your closed loss data or your expired trial list is really good for intent because they came. But we've been considering a bunch, and I think that's a purchase we probably will make in the next 6 months. But, it's a tough environment still from a spend perspective. So we want to make sure that the ROI is there.
6 cents, demand-based, none of them are cheap.
Yeah, I won't say who we've had before. I'll leave it at that.
Very expensive, yes. Got it. Well, Keith, I really appreciate the time, man. It's a pleasure having somebody with your background and experience on here. I know you're going to say LinkedIn, but where's the best place for people to connect with you?
Absolutely LinkedIn.
All right.
I'm pretty responsive. Even a lot of like the cold LinkedIn reaches to try to sell me stuff, I mostly respond. I just believe in like being courteous to salespeople. But
you're going to get a flood now.
I know, but it does not mean I'm going to buy your product. So I will respond.
I'll respond to the good ones. So little trick, and I've shared this before on the podcast, but my dad is Steve Lowisz. So I've always gone by Stephen M as a differentiator. And it's really funny because M isn't my first name on LinkedIn. So when somebody has a message saying Stephen M, I immediately know it's automated, throw that out. Anyone that takes the time to actually write something decent, I'm 100% with you. I will respond, even if I'm not going to buy your crap. So I hear you. Well, again, Keith, really appreciate it. Go connect with Keith Rabkin on LinkedIn. Again, appreciate it, man.
Thanks for having me.